Hello, world literature. Before we just transition here to the intro to Shakespeare's life and sonnets, just a reminder, what are our principles? Well, first principle, note your history with the bard. Second principle, don't worry about the bard's real life, worry about his words. Third principle, he made his mark at a pivotal moment in English history and for all of history, you could say. And last one, fourth one, Shakespeare's English is not Old English, but early modern English. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the handout. We'll start there. So if you go ahead, you turn to Introduction to Shakespeare's Life and Sonnets, you can turn to page 2. The reason being page 1, you don't need to really focus too much on. That was more of you kind of engaging your history with the bard, right? The first principle. And the reason I had you start with that is because I want you to know that it's laughable and ironic that I am somehow teaching this, because I would have never have imagined me teaching Shakespeare back when I was your age. Okay. So I'll explain a little bit. My history with the bard was I did see a play version when I was in middle school, and all I remember was falling asleep and thinking this was so boring and terrible. Okay. Luckily, I had a really good professor in college that was a person that he actually didn't know a lot about Shakespeare even before he started learning Shakespeare, but he made his career later on in higher kind of level acting with Shakespeare, and he really got passion for it, and he shared that, and it made it interesting when I learned more about kind of the acting of Shakespeare versus just of reading it. So what I want you to know is, whatever history you have with the bard, that's your history. Recognize it, but don't let it, kind of impede what's next for you. Okay, look now, going to top of page 2, and here's what we'll look at. So some quotes about Shakespeare. You did some of the free write. First quote, he was not of an age, but for all time. Whoa. Okay, now, what's interesting about this guy actually was a critic of Shakespeare. And the reason he mentions he's for all time is because we continue to use the English language, right? Until the English language, dies out or becomes non-existent, then Shakespeare might die down. But right now, right, that doesn't seem to be the case. Next one is probably my favorite quote of all, kind of related to Shakespeare. When I read Shakespeare, I'm struck with wonder that such trivial people should muse and thunder in such lovely language. Reason being I like this is because people like us can speak in epic fashion. Shakespeare was unique because it wasn't just displaying just the higher ups, and a lot of times he does do nobility or higher up in society, but even a shepherd or even a lower class someone, they can speak in a grand and epic way. And I love that about Shakespeare. The other thing to note is here, he talks about Shakespeare's wit. We will talk more about next week about the highest value of Elizabethans being wit and what that is. But wit, the idea of using thoughts in a logical sequence and then speaking them out loud. Okay, let's go to the next part, page 3. Or no, bottom of page 2, sorry. So, and building off of that, this actually is where we kind of talk more about wit. But bottom of page 2, this whole kind of section here is all about the idea of wit, or unpacking thoughts through language. So remember, Shakespeare uses the language for a reason. His characters are humans thinking through their problems. Hamlet describes his need to unpack my heart with words, Hamlet being one of his famous characters. They are people speaking their thoughts. The rich language is what gives life to the thoughts. Barry Edelstein, in his masterpiece, Thinking Shakespeare, best captured this idea in a short phrase. Speaking your thoughts, the alpha and omega of Shakespeare. So, why is this important? They're not like us. What I mean by that is, we don't always speak out loud what we're thinking, and we don't necessarily put it in a logical structure, in a chain of thoughts. So, whenever a character is speaking for some reason, you need to be, as a reader, trying to figure out why are they speaking. It's always a clue. It's easy to think of Shakespeare, right, oh, those are the characters that just ramble on and babble on and just need to be quiet. And I used to think that too. And sometimes I get frustrated with that because I don't understand what's going on. But there's more there, and the character's speaking for a reason. And I just need to kind of chill out and relax. Okay, top of page 3. So, top of page 3, Shakespeare's life, the bard of the Elizabethan era. Okay, and I had this quote here, and I won't read the whole quote, but, I wrote in the top, life equals a few facts. And beyond those facts is speculation. So, I will say this raises the question if there's anything that is important from his life. Okay, and that's actually what down here, this section, gets to what I think is important for him. So, first, here's what I think is important. This might be worth noting down in your notebook. So, you could say under your second principle, don't worry about the bard's real life, worry about his words. What is worth noting with his life? Well, that he was an average Joe, son of a tradesman, grew up in a small town, Stratford-upon-Avon, and growing up, he probably saw some traveling or touring acting companies come through, and he was kind of inspired from them, and he decided to go be an actor. And then he was an actor in London, and then he ended up being eventually a writer. So, the big thing is, it says down here, the golden age in English history, right? Shakespeare coming at exactly the right time when England is just forming into something powerful. Okay, I'm going to go down now. Okay. So the middle section of page 3 of Introduction to Shakespeare's Life and Sonnets. Historians often depict it as the golden age in English history. The Elizabethan time period is known for early modern English. Shakespeare would not be considered Old English by historians. However, his writings emerged at a time when English language was changing significantly. There was no standardized grammar and spelling. In many ways, Shakespeare established the use of certain words and language structures. So, keep in mind with this, right? Old English there, I put an example. Aufschild Schäfen Pratium, right? Does not sound anything like what we speak today. Early modern English, I am sick when I do look on thee. Does sound a lot similar. So the point being, Shakespeare came along, right? And there wasn't a lot of standardized rules. So he could kind of have a little bit of fun and shake it up and mix and match. But whatever he did then, everyone else copied after. And that's why he's so significant for us, is he comes at that time when the language is just transitioning. Right? So what I did is I didn't include in here the opening lines of Beowulf. I want you to go ahead and watch that. You only need to watch some of the 15 seconds of it maybe, but you'll get a sense of what does Old English actually sound like. And what I want you to notice how different Old English sounds from what we speak today and what Shakespeare spoke, early modern English. Okay. Shakespeare's not Old English, but didn't they speak different from us? Well, that's a good question. Yes, but it's remarkable how much we can understand the Shakespeare's language in our modern tongue. More importantly, when we don't understand Shakespeare, often there's something happening with the dialect or the way it was originally spoken. To see what they mean, please watch the following video clip. So, this is the one that is going to be for homework. You guys have watched through David and Ben Crystal's, which is a father and son. They're kind of cool. One's the linguist and one's the son that's the actor. They're kind of geeks, but they're actually going to look through at the dialect that maybe was spoken by Shakespeare. And what some of you are going to be surprised is it is not going to be what you think of kind of, oh, let's do Shakespeare, let's do the proper, British, blah, blah, blah. It's nothing like that. Now, let's go back to reviewing some of our principles, and I wanted to talk about those because I did miss a few things. So, principle 1, note your history with the bard. Recognize it. Second principle, don't worry about the bard's real life, worry about his words. Third principle, made his mark at a pivotal moment in English history and for all of history. Fourth principle, Shakespeare's English is early modern English, not Old English. Now, what I wanted to say is what we know of Shakespeare is the words that he has left behind. And I would say we can know that he definitely was deeply religious in some capacity, because there's so many of his plays are chock full of that. He seemed very familiar with kind of Christianity in different forms. Now, people kind of make different, was he Catholic, Protestant, Anglican, what exactly? There's different theories about that. Okay. Now, going to the third principle, what I want you to remember with the English history is, right, England transitioning from backwater, podunk, ragtag group stuck on a watery and cloudy island, right, into a united and prosperous nation. Okay? It's their golden age, just like you should be thinking back to the golden age of Athens that you learned in world history. Shakespeare became that national poet who captured their history and development. Okay. Good. We can go ahead and I will start to wrap up here. So homework for the weekend, I due Tuesday morning at 9. I should say 9 a.m. Sorry, my apologies about that. I will go ahead and change it. So Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Post your Edmodo small group about something you learned from this presentation. So, it'd be something, I would try to put it in your own words. Don't just write a principle down that I mentioned. Second one, briefly watch the video about Old English, then watch the video about the original pronunciation posted in the previous slides. So that'll be about a 10-minute clip, super fascinating, and also shows you how we miss a lot of some of the jokes that take place. We miss because of the dialect there. All right, number 3 is a repeat. Okay, so ignore this part. I already did that in number 1. Okay. Number 3 is work on pages 3 and 4 of the PDF. Okay, so PDF Intro to Shakespeare's Life and Sonnets. Okay, what it should see is, you'll see on page 3 Sonnet 12, and then on page 4 you'll see the multi-draft kind of reading of Sonnet 12. The goal is to read through it multiple times, just like hearing a song, and look for different things. At the start, you'll start by reading through, noting your initial impression, and then you'll kind of go deeper into analysis. This is a method that I have kind of developed here for you guys to read through poems and engage that. Right, looking ahead to next Friday, March 27th, we'll have the Intro to Shakespeare quiz take the place of vocab quiz. In other words, hold off on learning Unit 18 vocab. Important note, this is a larger quiz than something like vocab. With Shakespeare, I've almost never given tests. I rely mostly often on 2 to 3 larger quizzes, roughly worth about 15 to 30 points. Thing is, if you're curious what might be on the quiz, these would be some of the things that you could go over. Most of these we have covered today, and we will continue to cover, like the principles. What we haven't gotten to is more at the bottom, the sonnet definitions, form and structure, and monologue analysis. So those would be something that you pick up and you focus on. Over here I did post or put on a picture of the Globe Theater today. Really interesting structure. It's designed so you can hear. They very much, just like the Greeks we talked about in first semester, with hearing the spoken word, they valued that. And they created this theater in the round to be able to hear those words. Now, in this case, it's a little bit different. These words lived out and acted versus just reciting, as in the case of the Iliad or the Odyssey. Okay, few things, resource and recommendations. There's an office hours, also really great article about relating our times to Shakespeare. All right, I hope you guys are doing well. Miss you, and I'll touch base with you next week.